My name is Doree, and I'm a newlywed widow. Now what? This episode is going to be different from every other episode I've ever done. Not only am I paying tribute to my husband that passed away less than a month ago, this episode is not going to be a typical show where we talk about different life strategies, personal development, and I encourage you and I interview people and I laugh and we give you all these insights. I'm going to give you some insights, but not the kind that I normally do. This is going to be an episode where I share my very personal story as I grapple with the grief of losing my husband. And I'm recording this episode the day before what would have been our second anniversary. So if you don't know, I got married almost 2 years ago, and I shared a personal episode then that kind of explained my thoughts behind getting married to him so quickly after we met, and kind of that feeling of having to explain myself to people that were shocked that I would do such a thing because I'm so measured and logical and stuff. So if you missed that episode, it was published in May of 2016, and it's called Pulling a Kerry Washington on Him. It might be interesting to compare my newlywed insights then to my widow insights here. So again, today I'm going to pay tribute to my husband, George, share a little bit about his journey, some of the feelings that I have about my grief, and a couple of takeaways for you. Again, this is just me giving you real talk. There's not much encouragement. It's not like a typical episode. It's just me sharing my heart and grief insights with you as it stands today, while paying tribute to the love of my life. So, if you're interested, let's go. Jorge Nieves was a funny, sweet, handsome, smart, and unapologetically Puerto Rican man who called himself the freaking Rican, and he had a heart of gold. He did lots of interesting things in his short adult life, including being a floor manager at the Phillips Arena for the Atlanta Hawks, working as an account executive for Clear Channel at a radio station in Atlanta, playing the saxophone with the likes of Celine Dion, and being an auto mechanic. He started working on cars when he was about 15, and he died at the age of 42, so he absolutely loved working on cars. He was a military brat and he grew up in various places, but most notably Germany, Puerto Rico, and Georgia. Even though he lived most of his life in Georgia, his number one team was the Minnesota Vikings. He was a diehard Vikings fan because it was a rival of his father's team, the Green Bay Packers. He was greatly disappointed that the Vikings didn't make it to the Super Bowl this year, just like the disappointment that a lot of us felt in 2017 when the Atlanta Falcons lost the Super Bowl. The Falcons was his second favorite team. So in the time that I knew George, I watched more football than I've ever wanted to watch in my entire life. He loved comedy shows and the Marvel movies, horror movies, and TV shows like Quantico, Lucifer, Blue Bloods, Criminal Minds, Hell's Kitchen, The Walking Dead, and WWE Monday Night Raw. He got our money's worth out of our Netflix subscription, that's for sure. Now, his journey at the end, the root of why he died is really in poorly managed diabetes. He had so many illnesses and complications that all stem from that. I knew almost nothing about the disease before this relationship, but I decided that even though I knew he was sick, that I wanted to be with him anyway because of how loving and genuine he was toward me. That was something that I was always missing. I was divorced in 2005, and I had spent over a decade as a single parent and wanting to have a meaningful relationship with someone who could, as they say, bring something to the table, like I was. But it didn't happen. Didn't matter my looks, my accomplishments, my income, none of that could overcome the fact that I could not grasp onto a meaningful relationship. But George loved me completely. It was a pure love. There was no manipulation, no ulterior motive, just pure love. And he loved me and his 4 children more than anything in this world. All he ever wanted for us was to be happy and follow our dreams and accomplish our goals in life. George's openness, his silliness, and his vulnerability is what connected us forever. That's why I chose to be with him and marry him even though I knew he was ill. Of course, I had no idea all of what was in store with just, the diabetes part of it, but nonetheless, he was giving me something that I had been missing for a long time. By all accounts from his friends and family, he needed me And I'm grateful that God was able to give me enough strength to make his last years happy ones, at least to some extent. As time went on with George, he continually lost his energy and capability to work and do things that newlyweds and married people often do together. There are different things that I needed him to do for me that he absolutely could not do because he was not healthy. He was devastated when he had to stop working, and the financial strain that we had was out of this world. We had to fight to get the disability from Social Security that he was entitled to, but thankfully the bright spot was when the American Kidney Fund was able to provide us with a quarterly grant, and that helped us a lot. So if you want to support somebody, go support the American Kidney Fund. They are awesome. There were some times where we could do things like have date nights, go to the movies, and things like that, but they were very few and far between. A quick summation of George's health in the last 2 years includes neuropathy, kidney disease, lymphoma, and peripheral vascular disease, all of which was caused by poorly managed diabetes and a lack of education, because he was taking insulin all along, but not the right kind or the right way. Also, last year, he fell and fractured his foot, and then his foot got infected, it had to be amputated, and he was unable to come up the stairs and sleep in the bed with me anymore. There's no way that you can go through all of those different losses and all of those illnesses, the increasing, loss of independence little by little, and not mourn for the way things were. All he wanted to do was work on cars and be my husband and do things with me and our family. And so this is why I tell people that even though I'm grieving now, we've been grieving all along, because there's all these little losses, or I guess I should say big losses, along the way to his final death. George had at one time 9 to 10 doctors, and I would always tell the doctors that he weighs what I should weigh and I weigh what he should weigh. And, I weigh over 200 pounds right now. And I've only weighed that one other time, and that was right after my divorce when I was extremely depressed. But truthfully and unconsciously, when I started taking care of George, I stopped taking care of myself. I stopped running and doing the self-care and activities that I used to do because I was giving my all to him. Now, I'm not blaming him for my habits, but caregiving can be an all-consuming part of your life. I mean, at one point, with all these 10 doctors in the last 8 months of his life, he needed about a good 90% assistance with the activities of daily living, brushing his teeth, taking a shower, putting clothes on, basic things that a lot of people do without thinking about it twice. So now I've got all this free time and I have more time to do things for me, but it just feels so weird. I did an episode back in February this year about chronic pain, and he had it. He suffered and cried so much. And I tell you, the only thing that is worse than suffering that way yourself is being there every day, watching the person that you love suffering every day. It's horrible. I'm so grateful to God that he shed his last tear and that he will never, ever hurt again. That is the comfort that I have to remind myself of, because for whatever reason, God decided not to heal him the way that I wanted him to be healed. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about grief. I guess some people might call it good grief. This is the part where I'm going to tell you how I'm doing. There's a lot of people that have been asking me, oh, how you doing, Doree? How you holding up? Are you okay? But there's an awkward nature of telling people that you're okay, because for some people, they feel like you should be crying all the time. And sometimes you just want to avoid telling them how you really feel, because you might feel like you're repeating yourself, or that they might feel awkward about not being able to help you. So I'm sitting here feeling what I feel, which I'm entitled to, but I'm also thinking about how the other person feels hearing me say this. Even with you listening to this podcast right now, I have no idea what you could be thinking when I'm telling you all of these grim details. So anyway, here's 5 points that I came up with about this first month of life AG after George. Okay, number 1, if there's anything I can do for you, is a phrase that really should not be uttered as a reflex. It's almost a cliche to say that, but you really need to only say that if you mean it. I'm going to say that one more time. when you're talking to someone that's grieving, you only say things like, if there's anything I can do for you, if you mean them. I asked for and received some very generous donations from so many people, and I am so grateful to all of you for doing that. I'm grateful for your prayers, for the money, for the kind words and thoughts. George did not qualify for life insurance because of his diabetes. And when we could have gotten some kind of product, life insurance wise, there would have been a 2-year waiting period because, after all, they're not stupid. Life insurance companies are companies. They're in business. They're not dumb. I even had a life insurance company offer to sponsor this podcast, but I couldn't accept it knowing that we had this real need and I couldn't get it. And George never wanted to be a burden to me in that way. So I'm just so grateful for all the donations. I want to say at least a good 80% or so of the final expenses were covered by people's donations. Thank you. Thank you so much. I find myself now doing a lot of purging because I'm relocating this summer, which was something that was always planned for us. We had decided that back in Christmas time that we would move and be closer to my family. So a lot of people that offer help, I need that help here in the city where I live, in my house, so donations and personal help is really what I need, but sometimes people can't offer that. So, I can't really feel bad. If you ask me that question, I'm going to give you the answer if there's anything I can do for you. So hopefully no one has, taken offense to my answer. Things that I've been doing in my house when people can't come, I've been doing little by little because it's got to get done. I've only got like one friend in this city and I don't want to, put everything on one person. I feel like that's a lot to ask, even though I'm going through a lot. I'm just not going to ask for one person to do so much for me. Number 2, the way that I feel at this moment is an utter void in his absence. From the day that we met and exchanged numbers until the last day that he spoke, which happens to be Easter Sunday, George and I have spoken to each other every single day. And there is absolutely no one else in my life that I can say that about. There is no one, not my parents. No one else has talked to me every day that I've known them except for George. So to say that I have to adjust is an understatement. I can't get his reactions about things that are going on in my day, just stuff that I want to bounce off of him, my accomplishments, when I'm booking voiceover gigs and I'm doing different things that I've been dreaming about. He would be so happy and so proud of me. But now I can't tell him. He's gone. I no longer have my best friend to talk to or do things with. So now I'm in a situation where I'm alone in that. I had a best friend, a female best friend, a few years ago. Actually, she stopped speaking to me probably about 6 months before I even met, 6 months before I got married. She stopped speaking to me for what I feel is a really stupid reason, because what I had to do with my sister, and that's family. But anyway, she stopped speaking to me and I called and she didn't answer. So, you can't force anybody, right? And so I let her go, and George became my new best friend. So she has no idea that I ever got married. And like I said, I'm kind of alone in this, despite my efforts, trying different churches, going to different networking events, trying to do different things to get out the house because I work from home. And so, like I said, I'm going to move this summer. I'll be near my family, but the friend thing is still going to be an issue because I don't have very many friends where I'm going either. At least for the short term, it will be because, even though I have friends where I'm moving back to, they're married. Friendships just change a lot when you get married and things like that. So I can't assume that they're just going to drop what they're doing with their families to hang out with me. This is another thing I've always prayed to God about, besides meeting a man that would love me and that could really be my partner, was that I would have some really strong, genuine friendships. And so I'm still waiting for that, Lord. I know you hear me, but I really need that right now. Number 3, sometimes I feel alone because I'm a young widow and I don't know anyone else who is. When I went to the funeral home to coordinate everything was really set up for old people because people expect that you die when you're old, like when you're 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, not when you're 42. So it was just weird. And yeah, a lot of people have experienced death with their loved ones as far as, a parent or a grandparent or even a sibling. But it's totally different losing a grandparent and losing a spouse. I know this. I've lost grandparents. I lost one of my grandmothers last year. I can say this. I know this. George had a will, like I talked about in the last episode, but he didn't specify what to do with his things. So now I'm struggling with that too. And I just wish there's different things I could talk to with another woman who's a widow and get advice about. I don't know if it really matters how old she is, but it's just my thoughts is, okay, I don't know any other young widows. Number 4, I'm adjusting to the extra time that I have. And there's a relief there with having more time because it was super uber stressful caring for George. Like I said, I had to do so much for him. His activities of daily living just continued to decline. But I also feel guilt because of the relief. Like I'm relieved, but I feel guilty about being relieved. Even though caregiving is hard work and people understand that, no matter how much you love a person, it's hard. There's this feeling of guilt that I'm relieved, but I'm still missing him at the same time. Speaking of relief, I remember the relief that I had when I got married because I was struggling with being a single mom for like 12 years, doing it by myself. And now I realized that I'm back to square one again. I'm back to doing that again because he's gone. So it's like I have to cope with this loss. And, my identity has changed. My role has changed. I apologize to my 14-year-old daughter because she finally got a dad and she lost him. Her biological father is alive, but he's not a real presence in her life. And so that had always been something in the back of my mind that, I would really love to not only have a meaningful relationship, but be able to have someone that could be like a father figure to my daughter. And she had one and she lost him. So if you're interested in reading about things that I used to talk about pertaining to being single and different things that I thought were whack, like people asking me why I'm single, I think that's the stupidest thing ever. People don't ask you, well, why are you married? But they ask why you're single. Things like that are on my blog, which I have not updated in a long time, but I'm sure the posts are still there. You can find it at dareesinsights.wordpress.com. It's DAREES insights.wordpress.com. If you're curious, I spent many years praying for this man, this husband, that loved me and all this. And I got him for less than 2 years. And it just really seems unfair. But I know life's not fair, right? Okay. Point number 5, my last point with this grief thing. I feel uncomfortable at church. Even though I know and believe that God is good all the time, I think about what I've asked God for, where I am now, what I've gone through. Everything that I hear from the pulpit really has a different spin to it now. Like it hits me differently. I'm like more sensitive to it. So it's not like I'm going to stop going to church or that I'm going to stop believing in God, but it just feels uncomfortable right now. It feels weird. Now, I did have a really comforting dream the other night. I wasn't in church, but I was asleep dreaming, and I met George back in the day. But it was weird because back in the day, at this time, like back in the 90s, he would have been a teenager just like me, but he was a grown man. But it was just a really comforting dream, and I'm just going to believe that God gave me that dream to kind of help calm me down about some of the feelings and insecurities that I have about, what's gone on with George. Now I've said all that. I've gotten out all of my stuff. I'm going to give you 2 takeaways before we close. All right. These are 2 things I want to leave you with that I've learned from this experience. Number 1, cherish your family. Do not take your family for granted. Do not take your abilities for granted. When George started experiencing losses, he spent a lot of time feeling like people didn't care. It's like, okay, I know that this person and this person and this person know that I have these sicknesses and these illnesses. Why aren't they calling me? Why aren't they reaching out to me? Why do I post stuff on Facebook and nobody likes it? Sometimes he got lonely. We started seeing a change in this after he got the cancer diagnosis because for some reason, Cancer was like, oh my gosh. But when he had the kidney disease, which is even worse, in my opinion, that's like, there's no cure for that. The cancer is what got people's attention. Everyone will not ask for help, especially if they're physically or emotionally vulnerable. So my advice is to check up on your people, check up on your family, check up on people that you love, your closest friends. When somebody crosses your mind, don't ignore that. Go with it. Don't wait for a tragedy. Number 2, take care of your body. Like I said before, we didn't have the typical newlywed experience. He was almost always sick and tired. Literally. Not sick and tired like when people get frustrated, but really, he's always sick and tired. George used to half joke that he just wanted someone to take his head and stick it on a healthy body. But there's no such thing as a body transplant. So if you want to work, travel, serve, and enjoy the opportunities that life has to offer us, take care of your body. Your body is your temple. I know you've heard this before, but it's really true. There is nothing in this world that you can do worthwhile if your body doesn't work. If you can't see and you can't hear, you can't walk, you have no energy, you can't move, you can't get out of bed, there's not much you can do. It's no wonder that he watched Netflix all the time. There wasn't that much that he could do. My God, he wanted to, but he just couldn't. So don't take your health for granted. Don't take your family for granted. That's what I want to leave you with. I think that if George were here now, if I could hear his voice, because he is with me all the time, right? He would tell me that he loves me and that he's proud of me and that everything's going to be okay. I would love to hear from you if you have experienced a loss of a spouse or a significant other and have insights that you could share that might encourage me and others listening that are going through it. Email me at kickingit, no G, just KICKINIT @DereeAllen.com or message me on social media @DereeAllen. Thank you so much for listening to me pour out my heart and share my grief with you. I know that I am not alone, and I hope that you know that you're not alone either.